Welcome, everyone. Today we're celebrating National Happy Hour Day, a holiday that brings people together to unwind, connect, and enjoy a taste of their favorite beverage. But how did this beloved tradition start? Let's dive into the fascinating history of happy hour and its evolution over time. Happy hour, in its earliest form, actually began in the early 20th century, originating from a completely different context. The term was used in the United States Navy to describe scheduled entertainment events on ships, including boxing and wrestling, intended to lift sailors' spirits during long, often grueling stints at sea. In this early version of happy hour, it was all about unwinding and lifting morale. Flash forward to Prohibition in the 1920s when the idea of happy hour took on a new form. Back then, people would gather in private homes or secret speakeasies for a pre-dinner drink, enjoying a moment of relaxation before heading out to public, alcohol-free dinners. This was one of the many creative ways Americans pushed back against the restrictions of Prohibition. By the 1950s and 60s, happy hour became a commercial phenomenon, as bars and restaurants used it as a tool to attract patrons. Since then, it's grown into a cultural exchange of flavors, ideas, and experiences across the world. Different countries have their own unique versions of happy hour, from Spain's aperitivo hour to Japan's nomikai, and beyond, each bringing its own twist to the ritual of enjoying a drink with friends and family. Today, happy hour represents more than just a drink. It's a chance to connect, share stories, and explore the art and craft beyond what's in our glass. In the world of craft spirits, happy hour is a perfect time to celebrate the artistry of distillers, brewers, and vintners who pour their hearts into creating unique experiences for us to savor. So, this National Happy Hour Day, let's raise a glass to the history, camaraderie, and creativity that make happy hour a beloved tradition. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guests. He's Rio Chenery. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Rio, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rich. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Fermented Adventure, we're going to talk Tepache Sazón today. This is a fermented beverage. So, you're right in our wheelhouse. We met at Bar Convent, Brooklyn. Rio, for those that don't know, what is Tepache Sazón?
Well, it's a tepache. I'm not sure if everyone out there knows what a tepache is, but it's a fermented fruit or vegetable wine from Mexico. It's has a history before the arrival of the Spanish, so it's extremely old. And we make a type of tepache from the state of Michoacán, and it's I think it's the first or the second in the U.S. market. So it's a new category, I guess, for modern drinkers, but it's been around for a long time.
We're going to talk history now, because you talk about the origin of Tepache and just the varying degrees of recipes. You actually wrote a book on Tepache, or you've collaborated on a book. What exactly is Tepache?
Well, Tepache it's a very diverse, so there's no distinct set of rules for what defines a Tepache, but it's really a fermented fruit or vegetable. Tepache, the word tepatl comes from the Nahuatl word for young corn kernel. So it was originally a fermented corn drink back with the Aztecs. So it's going back a long time. And as the introduction of new fruits and flavors from from the Americas, it started becoming more of a fermented beverage, so pineapple and fruits. But to this day, there's still that traditional corn fermented tepache is made. We have that one of the recipes in the book you mentioned, and it really. It's defined by the way it's drunk, which is really interesting. It's not geographically defined, so you don't find certain tepaches made in different states of Mexico. Rather, you'll have in the cities, you'll have these market tepaches that are really made that are non-alcoholic, and they're made for health benefits, and they're made to sort of help the taco go down well, so to cut through the grease and the oils, and they're not really made to get drunk, I guess, or for a celebration. But then you go into the rural communities of Mexico, and for quinceañeras, for bolas, for these patrona parties for the towns, you'll have these really big batches of tepache that are made. They take a long period of time, about a month to make, depending on the recipe. And it's more of a fruit wine, so you'll find this this more of a care being taken to ensure that it's an alcoholic fermentation and not a lactic or acetic bacteria fermentation, so it won't be so funky. And everyone will get onto the tepache during the evening, and it will be a big party. So it really depends on the social context. And then you have these tepaches made for ceremonies, and these are really rare. We've found a few of them that still exist in Mexico, but these are really in indigenous communities that are still making tepaches as an offering, and they were made a specific recipe for the gods, and these communities are still making the tepache for millennia or for hundreds of years. So it's a really interesting drink in that sense that it's so broad. So you have these different interpretations, and I think in the US now there's these probiotic tepache, which does exist. There's the De La Calle tepache on the market, and then there's this celebration style tepache that we make, which is more of a fruit wine, and so that's kind of what tepache is, in a short way. But there's lots more to it, I guess.
In your research of tepache, you spoke about the origin being more of a corn-based. We know and understand mead and how, as a fermented honey wine, how that came about.
Yes.
The origin of that corn tepache, was that a purposeful fermentation, or did somebody just at some point, were they boiling corn and they just walked away and came back a week later and realized, wait a second, we've got something here. What's going on?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know the exact origins, but corn was the staple, I guess, back in that time, and it was used for so much of the diet. So I think it would just be a natural extension of that. And like you said, one day they left the corn soaking for too long, and it tasted good, and it was so I think that corn was really that part of everyday life in central Mexico, especially, and then there's also things. I mean, I'm not sure if you've spoken about pulque in your episodes, but in a lot of recipes they will start the fermentation with a little bit of pulque. Pulque is also a very old drink that goes back millennia. So there's these aspects of tepache that are really interesting, and it's really a symbol of Mexican culture, which is fascinating for me.
Here in Pennsylvania, we have a tradition of polka, not necessarily pulque. So what is a pulque, or what is that?
That it's just it's the sap of the agave plant. So it's instead of cooking the agave and fermenting it in that sense, they remove the top of the maguey pulquero, and they start collecting the sap. They scrape the edges and they collect the sap every day, and the plant sort of shrivels up and dies over 3 months. So it's a completely different way of collecting and fermenting agave, and pulque is another very, very old drink from this part of the world.
How did you yourself discover tepache? How did it become not just, hey, I'm just drinking this, to I want to learn more about it, I want to make it, I want people to understand the history of it? How did that happen for you?
So I'm not sure that my background is more in distilling. So I have like Bacanora, there's another agave distillate called Raicilla. So we have a distillery in the mountains. Estancia Raicilla is where I started my journey with alcohol. And so in the mountains where we have our distillery, we had a caretaker that would look after, would live there on the land to make sure no one was going during the nights and taking our booze and whatnot. And Margarito is from Michoacán, and he loved to make his father's tepache. So when I would go up, I live down here on the coast. I'd go up every weekend and would bring all of the ingredients from the market stalls on the way up there, and we would start making different styles of tepache, different fruits, different flavors, and then when people would come to our taverna or distillery, we would give them some raicilla and some tepache. So it was just something that we liked as a nice extra sort of surprise for visitors, and everyone loved the tepache. I mean, it was always something like, "Can you make more of this? Can you make more of this?" And then I think it was back in 2018 we started working with our partner in the US, Backbar Project, on trying to get something a little more commercial. So that's kind of how it started. It was never really a plan to be a commercial product. It was more something to do there at the distillery and enjoy. But that's how life is, I guess.
It's a happy accident.
Yes, yeah, the stars aligned, and we went from there.
As you talk about this tepache and all that it is, I'm thinking of Pituro in a way from Puerto Rico, where there's more celebration around it. There's more community around it, different flavors, different components, where everybody may be making their own little tepache recipe, fruits and vegetables. So you really bring this together for a celebratory moment. Obviously, now this has come to be something I had no idea about, the probiotic value, or, being some sort of a digestif in a way. So there's really a lot that this can be done. You can do a lot with this, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the comparison with the health focused tepache would be, kombucha. So it has a lot of lactic acid and acetic acid bacteria that help with gut health. And that's something that, we found a local tepache here in Nayarit, and that's exactly what it's made for. So the family make it, and their friends and their family will use it when they, when they've eaten too many tacos and they need something to help them clear themselves out. And that's kind of how tepache, a lot of people know that tepache just as that. And I think in the US as well, you'll find a lot of these tepaches made in bars and restaurants that have like a 48-hour production cycle. So, they're very quick, and you're getting really a lot of the acetic acid and the lactic acid bacteria, consuming the alcohol. So very low alcohol ferment, and it's really made for that funkiness and just bright flavors of the fruit, rather than a fruit wine, which really goes through a number of different processes, which is more of the celebratory. And so those two distinct versions are very, I think people sort of kind of get them confused. And if you've only my wife is from Mexico City, so she only grew up with the market style tepache.
Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast. This tepache. Now, this is a piña y canela. Did I say that right?
Cinnamon. Yeah, cinnamon canela. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. You're correcting me. I'm the one that's sorry.
No. I think the canela. We didn't translate the label into English, but there's a canela is the word for cinnamon, and that's our first product off the line. The well-known, I guess, combination for Tepache is the pineapple and cinnamon, and sometimes you have some cloves in there, but sort of that sort of allspice type flavor with pineapple. Oh, it looks delicious.
I love. I just poured some while you're explaining that. It's almost like, because being the bottle suggesting with the pineapple on there, and it almost looks like a caramelized or roasted pineapple to give that color. And there's a lot of bubbles here. And
yeah.
What I love for us, Rio, is we met at Bar Convent, Brooklyn, and I think you were there the 2 years in a row.
Yeah,
so we met you and got to share this twice. But the experience is now I have a clean palate, haven't had any other alcohol, consumption. So I get to have this unique experience where I have this to have on its own. So that's what I look forward to. You said the first. Now, are there many other iterations, or how many other iterations are there in the line?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the next flavor that we're looking at launching in the US is a guava and hibiscus, and that should be hopefully early next year in the US. We're very excited about that. It's slightly drier, has some more tannins because of the hibiscus. It's a different profile, but it shares the funky, little bit of funkiness in there, and that Tepache bite. But that should be our next product off the line.
I have to say, and again, I'm being drawn back to the first time of enjoying this. I find this to be so refreshing.
Absolutely.
But I also, get all these. There's so many layers. There's the sweetness. There are, as you said, this different components to it. I get the bitterness is what really lingers for me right now on the palate. And we started out talking about Kalinga Bacanora. They were previous guests on our podcast. And I said, I wonder how we can incorporate this with the Bacanora. And I think this would make a wonderful cocktail. There are a number of ways. It almost has, all right, if I do, like, let's say, an old fashioned or something along that line, this adds the bitterness, but I can now change it up a little bit. Are there cocktails that you have that you've made or are making at the distillery or where you're making this?
We haven't made down here. We don't make much mixology with the Tepache, but I know that in the US, it's like one of the major sort of uses is in cocktails as a top. I think it's quite common as a mix with a spritz. It's also quite common. They're also been popular in a michelada as a replacement for beer. People that don't want to consume gluten or whatever, it's a great sort of replacement. It's got the flavor, I think, mixes well with the michelada mix. So there's been a lot of playing around with the Tepache since we've launched, and I think like mixology has been a really main component of our growth. I think it's a lot of I guess that's why we're the Brooklyn Bar Convent, and all the bartenders are going crazy over how they could use it in this way and that way, and it's exciting. But it mixes well with mezcal and raicilla. Actually, I think it mixes better with raicilla. It doesn't. It's a little bit less smoky raicilla, so it has a nice combination.
I want to start making pineapple mojitos.
Oh yes,
add this to the pineapple mojito. I think that would create such a depth of flavor. And somebody looks and goes, "Wait, what is this? I haven't had this before." You're introducing yourself to the American market here. Where can people find the Tepache?
I mean, the easiest place I think that we're available is in Total Wines. I think we're in a few other chains, but Total Wines is the big one. I think that's in most states. I think it's in Pennsylvania. But we're not in Pennsylvania, he says. Okay.
We got them. That's all right. We're serviced by Delaware and New Jersey. So we have.
Oh, okay.
we have the ability to overcome.
I see. I mean, I think in New York we have it in Astor wines, and I mean, it's getting out there. I won't say that we're in every supermarket or small bodega, but we're moving through the market quite well. We've had some great success over the last 18 months, so we're super happy with where we're at in the US. But I think there's also, if you go onto our website, you can plug in your zip code and it will tell you where the closest store is. So that's probably I should have just started with that. That's going to be the easiest way, and it'll tell you where you can find us.
Plug in your zip code, find out where you can get your hands on this, and also, enjoy this. With this, the Tepache Sazón, we met obviously, and you're pouring this and you talk about the bartenders, but how do you distinguish this on the shelves? How do you, if I'm in Total Wines and Spirits and I see, Tepache Sazón, what is that?
This?
How do you entice? What do you do?
That's an amazing question, Rich. Well, that's what we're doing at the moment. Where does this sit in the minds of consumers? What is Tepache? What is Tepache Sazón? And it really sits for us in between a beer and a cider. And I think people that really move towards liking the sort of, like you talk about, the bitterness and then the side of the fruitiness. And so Tepache, and particularly celebratory Tepache, is really a fruit wine or a cider made from different fruits. And I think that's what we're going for, is people that are really interested in maybe they love cider, but they're kind of over it. They've had it for too many years and they want something else. And it can be very much a replacement for cider lovers to try something else. And that's kind of what we're trying to position our product as to people that are interested in trying it.
Rio, as we're speaking, as I am just still sipping this through our conversation, as the effervescence diminishes, as those gases just explore now the atmosphere, it's a little bit heavier on the palate, but you start to get less of a bitterness, but more of an astringent or a sour note. And to that point that you said, more like a cider, it started drinking to me like a cider, that I now get those components where you're talking about, I'm exploring the fruit component so much more. What a fun beverage to really play with on its own, or experiment with cocktails and on a side of other things. How much? Yeah. What's the ABV on this?
It's 7%. So it's, you don't want to be, get into a couple of them, but they are strong. They're not light.
I really truly believe that you've given me the power of suggestion, because as I sip this too, I'm thinking, I can really wrap myself around a taco and this Tepache Sazón, and now I'm just going to run out and get tacos. You have shout out. Do you make your own? Does somebody make them? Do you have a place you're picking up tacos there where you're living?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are. This is the taco mecca. So we're all the types of tacos that you can imagine. So it's exactly what it's supposed to be doing, with that sort of really high acid, sort of delicious fruity beverage. It cuts through the fat of the taco, and it's delicious as a combination. So we really we actually did a photo shoot all around tacos last year, where we were exploring the best taquerias in Mexico City, and they had the sazon. So it was all about combining the best of both. But it's super interesting, and we have our own pineapple field, so we have the whole world of understanding the fruit which goes into it, and how that sort of also changes during the season. So the pineapple isn't a fruit that has a 3-month or a short season. It's actually available all year round. But you find there's this variation in the profile. So you'll find during the colder months here in Mexico, there'll be a little bit more acidic, less sugars, and during the warmer months it would be less acidic and higher sugars. And And so we blend, so trying to get our product consistent over the course of the year. But the pineapple really is such an amazing fruit to work with, and I mean everything goes into the tepache apart from the crown. So you have all of the flavors of the skin. So when we're pressing the fruit, you'll get all like the free flow before it starts pressing is all that really sweet juice that's just coming off the flesh without having to press. And then during the end of the pressing, you get all those sort of astringent notes, the green notes, the bitter notes that you spoke of as it's going into the skins and the fibers of the pineapple, and then that gets all mixed together and in the fermentation and really sort of helps make that complexity.
The carbonation. You talk about the whole process of fermentation, this effervescence here. Is that added at some point, or is that all coming from the fermentation?
No, it's all from the fermentation. We do a double fermentation, so we go through a normal wine cycle from the juice to the ferment. There's no CO2 captured in that. We have just closed fermenters where the CO2 is being displaced, and then we will rack our ferment onto another bright tank, and that's where we can capture our CO2, and that's where we add all of our goodies, our piloncillo, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, but that's the traditional sugar that we use. It's a brown sugar. It's that where you get some of those bitter caramel notes, and we'll add the cinnamon, the canela, pineapple juice, and we'll restart the ferment, and that's where we're going to capture our CO2. And that's where you get the effervescence from. So it's a long process. I mean, it's not short. So it's very similar to a sparkling wine or a cider in that sense.
This is tremendously fascinating. And again, as we go on our fermented adventure, we discover more things. These little regional items and recipes that have been around for years that now we in the world are becoming introduced to. And it's wonderful because you stop and say, all right, I've had this Tepache Sazón and I can't wait for the next flavor to come out because, again, it's different. It's not something I'm going to have all the time. I wonder, you talked about the recipe, and this is an old family recipe.
Yes.
Yeah. The cinnamon. I mean, are you adding? Is it a bark that you kind of steeping? Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah, the cinnamon comes in these long. I think they're about a meter long, about 1 foot and a half. I'm not sure what the conversion is over there. And they come from Sri Lanka. Cinnamon, unfortunately, there's no Mexican producers or large producers of cinnamon. It all comes from Sri Lanka, but it's the Ceylon style cinnamon. So it's a little bit different to the cassia cinnamon that I think it's more common in the US, the thicker bark. But we use those long sticks. We put them into the final dosage, or that mixture that I spoke about for the secondary fermentation, really goes through a small heat process, so to really extract the flavors. So we're putting it into a boiler with a steam jacket, and that's heating up the piloncillo, the sugar that I mentioned, the brown sugar, the pineapple juice, and the cinnamon, and just really trying to extract those flavors. That's also where you're going to get some of those bitter notes, because when it gets that heat, the cinnamon imparts some bitterness. The piloncillo, the sugar, the brown sugar, imparts some bitterness. And that really that really doesn't go through a fermentation cycle, so it's really going to be present in the final product. So that secondary fermentation doesn't take that long. So there's still a lot of the residual sugars and flavors there, really just to generate the CO2.
As we've deconstructed the process, the production process to make this, I have such a better awareness now of why this takes so long. And there's so much care and intentionality into making what goes into this little bottle. It really makes us even more special because you're working hard, and each component is treated somewhat differently. You talked about the pineapple, the different seasons or the different climates that may grow in. What about the yeast component? Is that something? Are there wild yeast in and around the area? You talked about the closed fermentation. Is that something that you have to be aware of in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not so much yeast. What we really are very cognizant of is lactic acid bacteria and acetic acid bacteria, which they're really present on the pineapple skin. So you'll find when a lot of the variation in from batch to batch will be how much of a lactic acid and acetic acid fermentation was able to be carried out in our product, because there is some funkiness to it. I mean, it's not a pure alcoholic fermentation. And so what we do is, once we get our pineapples and we remove the green crown, you'll go through a washing cycle. We have brushes that go through a short cycle to try and remove all the dirt, for starters, and then also help remove some of the bacteria and the microorganisms that are on the skin. It's not that we want a 100% sterile pineapple, but we don't want those microorganisms to take hold of the ferment, and we want a clean alcoholic fermentation. So what we do is we'll let that sort of start up and really add a little bit of the funkiness to our product, and then we'll put the juice in conditions that don't allow for acetic acid bacteria and lactic acid bacteria to thrive. So, talking about temperature, we're talking about the lack of oxygen. So those sorts of things can really help create a clean fermentation. And so we do use temperature for a cool fermentation, which is really back to our original recipe, was from Michoacán in the mountains, where it's very cold, and the fermenters would be placed in the ground outside, and they'd be very cold. It'd be like a 10 degrees fermentation. So we kind of have tried to replicate that in a modern environment using glycol chillers to circulate through our tanks. But everything is really trying to get that, to look after our product, like you say, and really, using natural ingredients makes everything that much harder. And you're not using concentrates and preservatives. And so what we need to do is blend a little bit as well when there's high acidic batches and low sugar so we're trying to get those ranges correct, so the pH range and the sugar range and the flavor profile kind of consistent over time. But it is a labor of love, but it's fun.
Rio, you were probably the guy I wanted to sit next to in chemistry class, because you get it and this excites you. And, on test day, I could have used a little help. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about today? Anything you want the listeners to know more about you or Tepache Sazón?
I mean, just go out and try it if you get a chance. I think it's something that I think a lot of people, I mean, when I say, there's some drinks I think are for certain types of people. I think Sazón or a Tepache in general, like my mum loves it, my dad loves it. They don't really like alcohol, but she always asks if I can bring her over some when I'm going to a house. So I think it's something for all ages and for all, maybe you're not going to drink it every day, but it's something certainly that I think people will enjoy to get their hands on and try and explore.
What's the website that people need to go to type in their zip code?
It's www.tepachesazon.com, and there you'll find a link to our find locator, store locator tab, and that's where the easiest way to get your hands on a bottle.
All right, so it's TEPACHESAZON.
That's correct.
All right, so yeah, if you're typing in some other things, I'm sure that autocorrect will help. I would tell people, look, if you want something fun, a little different, this is probably a bottle that might be something you're using more often. You got friends, you got family, you're taking it to the beach. It's no longer Taco Tuesday, it's Tepache Tuesday. So you want to make sure you stock up. Rio, thank you so much for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. Thank you so much for bringing this Tepache Sazón. If people want to find that book, where can they find that book to learn more about Tepache?
I wish I could say somewhere. No, it's unpublished at present, Rich. And if there's any publishers out there, get in contact. But we have it. We're going to have it on our website soon, so that would be the only place. But it's. I mean, if people are interested in,
they'll just come to your house and
I'll come to my house
and have copies available,
and I'll just read it to you, page by page.
All right, you get the audio version at your house, and you'll just start putting tepaches out. We'll have a great time.
That sounds great. No, well, if you do come down to Mexico for any reason, Rich, we'd love to have you.
You know what? We need to start putting Mexico on our travel itinerary. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rich. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Cheers.